I was researching two streets in Chicago, named Arlington and Rosslyn after the places in Virginia, and I didn't get what I was looking for, but found a bizarre string of crimes from 120 years ago. On November 16, 1904, a Wednesday, Melissa E. Russell took an 11 o'clock train from Milwaukee to Chicago. A few hours later, she and Walter Davis had a marriage license. They found a pastor, David Beaton, at his home in Lincoln Park, Chicago, where he performed the ceremony. The same house is standing today. It was a happy elopement until the groom, Walter R. Davis, a wealthy businessman at a lead pipe manufacturer in Milwaukee, denied that he had been there at all. He would call the pastor to the stand for a shocking testimony that someone else had posed as him for the wedding. This case perplexed the region, with the Times Press saying it was one of the most peculiar cases ever instituted in Wisconsin. I wondered at the truth of it. Was the bride fooled, or was she pulling her own scam? Before this, Melissa was married to David Russell. The couple entered the new century having been married for around 35 years. David had worked as a railroad conductor, then in alcohol. There are a few containers online from Russell, Olcott and Company, and then manufacturing. Their adult son, Irwin, was working as an agent for vaudeville acts. But on the 1900 census, Melissa had moved in with her 24-year-old daughter, Lily, in Milwaukee's Hanover Street, now South 3rd Street, in preparation for a divorce. David hired a private detective to follow Melissa. At their divorce proceedings in 1902, the detective said he saw Melissa take the North Greenfield streetcar from downtown Milwaukee to the home of Cassius C. Ward, staying there until late at night. The detective brought in the streetcar conductor who could testify to her taking the trip. Melissa's attorney found it unusual that he could remember years later, but the private detective had gotten his contact information, and that was a memorable interaction. Melissa accused her husband of capricious and fault-finding behavior. David was afraid that Melissa would poison him, refusing to eat her cooking unless she would also. 2 months after their testimony, Cassius Ward died on May 9, 1902. According to a Dr. Wright who was present, Melissa, the housekeeper or caretaker, not only made a signed deposit of $900, but took a diamond ring off of Ward's body. When challenged by the family, Melissa insisted that this was a fake diamond, but that Cassius had previously given her the real one for safekeeping and now as an inheritance. Part of the story was that Cassius would go to seedy businesses to collect from nickel slot machines. This raises two questions for me. One, what was a slot machine like in 1902? I found two examples on YouTube, one which is more of a spin wheel, one which has playing cards. Two, was Cassius running an illegal business? Obituaries called Cassius one of the great horsemen for training racehorses. Though racing and slot machines were two gambling businesses, this is decades before the Milwaukee Mafia was a thing. It's possible that Melissa mentioned this business, though, to embarrass the family. Melissa's claim would later grow to 1/2 of the real estate and personal property of Cassius Ward. Melissa's dispute with the Ward family went into courts for some time, with the newspaper now snarking, well known to readers, causing trouble in courts again. The Russells' divorce was finalized in January 1903. The Supreme Court of Wisconsin ruled on the Ward v. Russell case in March 1904. 8 months later, Melissa Russell made her trip to Chicago and took her vows in the home of David Beaton. As a pastor, there's more information about Beaton's past and future beyond this story. He and his wife were from Scotland and had served communities in Newfoundland, Michigan, and South Dakota before joining Chicago's Lincoln Park Congregational Church in 1891. While there, he published a short novel, Cyrus the Magician. At a time when spiritualism and seances were sweeping America, Beaton wrote about the Apostle Paul's encounter with false prophets and magicians. It's not clear why the couple came to Beaton's church. The article says, after a few tries, which could be trying other churches or finding Beaton at his home. According to the pastor's later testimony, the man I married was a stout, rather thick-set man. He had rounded shoulders and rather crouched in his chair. He did not remove his overcoat during the ceremony, and I had to remind him to lay aside his hat. He appeared to be a molder or other sort of skilled mechanic and had several days' growth of beard on his face. Early the next year, Walter Davis, a widower with a young son, heard about the wedding claim and began legal action. In May, the Sentinel notes, "Suits and countersuits in which Mrs. Russell has figured have become frequent in the past 2 years." The deputy had difficulty serving paperwork, and foreclosure began on her home. An attorney contacted Reverend Beaton, who confirmed the wedding took place. Mrs. Russell's case took up a major section in the Times Press gossip section. When she took the stand, Mrs. Russell identified Mr. Davis in the courtroom and said she had a marriage license and certificate, but did not bring the documents with her. Copies were later submitted. Mr. Davis claimed here that he was hypnotized or drugged, while Russell was his nurse. But a newspaper report a few days later says he did not know her. Reverend Beaton and his wife testified that they were sure that Mr. Davis was not the groom that day. He admitted that the man he had married was hard of hearing, and the lawyer insinuatingly told him, "So is this Mr. Davis." At this point, Mrs. Russell came over and whispered to her attorney, who triumphantly said, "Now, let me refresh your memory. Don't you remember that during that ceremony, the groom took off his glasses to wipe them, and they fell to the floor?" "No such incident happened," was the positive and disconcerting reply. Mrs. Russell looked daggers at the genteel-looking minister. I feel like this writer desperately needs Hollywood to be invented. He is trying his hand at screenwriting already. Later in June, Russell barricaded herself in a room to avoid appearing in court. This story was so outlandish, it made it into papers around the country that summer, though the Los Angeles Times version is missing most of the details. In the fall, Mrs. Russell was held in contempt. Mr. Davis ultimately won the case a year later, in October 1906. He brought multiple witnesses who said he was in Milwaukee and had meetings and conversations on the Wednesday in question, that he did not know Melissa Russell. I did notice the contradiction between this and an earlier statement that he was drugged or hypnotized, but the original story is not clear when Melissa would have been his nurse, and the new story does not say that he was fully healthy either when he met the witnesses. It could be that after a year of the case not going away, Mr. Davis did the due diligence to find usable witnesses. In 1909, Walter Davis, who you'll recall was hard of hearing, was struck and killed by a streetcar in downtown Milwaukee at the intersection of Walker and Reed, today's South 2nd Street. On the 1910 census, Melissa Russell was recorded living with her ex-husband David and daughter again, back to normal. The household also included an adopted 2-year-old from Irish parents and a lodger. David Russell would die in 1912. 2 adult sons and his daughter are mentioned in the obituary, but nothing of his ex-wife. Now, when I was retelling the story offline, some people asked me if Melissa Russell could have been telling the truth about her marriage. Russell and Davis did live in the same part of Milwaukee and procured a real marriage license. I don't know what kind of paperwork was needed for that in 1904, but the pastor and his wife were reliable witnesses against her. It would be difficult for them to remember details of a routine wedding 6 months later, but this unknown couple showing up at their home late in the day without guests, and the groom's faux pas of his coat and hat made an impression. Melissa could have been going through a mental health crisis, or she could have been a victim of fraud herself. I doubt this because she would be the only beneficiary of the wedding. She also held the wedding outside Milwaukee, where people would not know the real Walter Davis. This was a departure from the usual science and history content on my channel, but was such an odd local gossip story that I wanted to dig in. I'm a real human person and strive for accuracy in these videos. I hope you'll like and subscribe for more.